Welcome, I am Ahmed. I am telling you stories about movies. Prepare your favorite drink, and let's start the story. Our film beginner in the era of the pharaohs in the days of Queen Cleopatra and Lee fell in love with Roman leader Antonio. Their love story ended up being the dragon by suicide rather than being kept apart. The world is the most valuable gift the leader has given to Cleopatra. They are egg hills of pure flesh, decorated with jewels. The long time it was all thought that the tiles were the eggs of some legendary countries. In the year of 1000 auxiliaries and 7 in Cairo were discovered by accident from a fit. She's missing for the day and no family has ever been there. And Beacon speeches in a movie and drivers about Tilt's F's. They reveal the world criminal Nolan making a replica of the egg displayed in Rome. Moving on where it is displayed and Pippin. The meaning of the word red bulletin indicates the highest level of internationally wanted international police criminals in every country of the world. And in the spirit of Rome with Agent John who specializes in Graham, the technician responsible for the arrest of the criminal Nolan and beater on him with his grocery period. And Bacon is sure that he sought to steal the egg in the museum and the spirit and support for the protection of the egg, and because he had information from a source named Hoopy Shop, he would say that Nolana Hims was a rip-off, and as soon as they got to the Hall Belagua that the egg was in place. June uses a thermal sensor for the hall's heat reader. He says to his colleague that the egg is made of pure flesh and flame-reflecting radiation because it is almost necessary to keep the flowers of their feet in red, not blue. The only one to find out if the suit they were in is real, it's any liquid on it. In the spirit of the egg, it is called Suda and Bathsheba, and the original egg is Manola, who is sneered at among the two. While Mano, Bailiff John is ordering a piggy lock from the hall and running away before the door locks it, and Beacon Nolan is so agile and fast that he takes me away from anywhere. Development and in the scaffolding of iron, which he is aware of and capable of dismantling. But it's John's legacy and threatening him with his gun. It's what moves and delivers the egg with him. Agent Tiji poked his foot and distracted John, so Nola tries to run away from him. John Bean on it with an enemy through the museum's adultery, and they fell on the roof of the museum from Barra and Booker. Nol he comes down in the tailings tube and sees John, but beast rate Nolan or motorcycle is old and flees the place and beveled from the police with the original Cleopatra egg and Ben Bali. 56 hours after the robbery, Beacon Nola arrived at his home for the first time, entering John Kayad's legacy on the coup and Ra, and the police forces flourished at all times, along with the agent who caught Nolan and said that he was wanted in a different country. He escaped before almost 6. John tells him that he started studying his character from an hour ago, stole the lady's red hat painting from the Tate Museum of the year of Alpine and 14. But we won't say that what a monster can fail is that he stole it. But Bebza is all on caution. Bigmel John described Nolan's character as the only son of his father, Shorty Swiss, and his mother, an American professor. The theft began 6 years later and he discovered that he was a professional in theft and planning. He loves working for him and all his operations with the intention that they are famous in the media. The most important need of his operations is to risk that he escapes. He escapes the last of Zia's because he feels pleasure from the theft, so that he fills himself with Zaki and is better than the rest. And by drinking the source she told him on his address in detail because he almost got it. It's not the world's most demanding works of art that I've shown it to get rid of. John degrades the egg in Arabic alone, and a spirit rides Arabic and tells him the market that the Arabic door is not open, and B Cherub is disguised as a police force and is able to steal the egg and degrade it with a fake egg and back Tani Roma after the passing of 2 and 2 HRS. From Nolan's arrest and Bacon John's 1 hour ahead of his flight, the agent said to him that the egg was with her, that she looked out of the biscuit, and that he would throw her feet on the floor so that she could break down and have them fake. And they said that the last one had the original egg, and I called his main unit. There are in it and all his papers can be visited ordinarily. However, his bank account received $1 million credit from an encrypted party. He stole the egg and was arrested. He was locked in a prison in the icebergs of Russia and Baykayad with Nolan in the same cell and a re-eaten Peggy of their own, and Bacon John surprisedly chirped, "My name is Cleopatra. You're almost walking with a pill that gets rid of whatever you can chase it to be free to steal the second egg." Then she spins on the tart and wins the whole sum for herself. The second egg is located at a global arms dealer named His Voice. He is known to be obsessed with strangling his victims. He is a young man whose father tries to stifle him and make his voice every year a masquerade at the palace with his senior clients, and his presence in the second White Palace amidst all his possessions, and he would have stolen it if he had not been caught by a superpower. So I say to John that it's what a policeman says in the middle of the prison, because if he knew she'd be killed. Dalm is in the text of the hall and says to all those who are there that he is not a policeman. He is a character analyst in Albusta, and his name is very much Special Agent John. And before it increases, prison guards took them to the prison captain's office because he demanded to show them, lock them down, and Bicho blossomed that she was the captain and said that she was destitute. Chatting with them, and with John's self-esteem about what you worked in. I hacked into Base's call to his head office and I told Base that Mawfish had his name John, and then he got the projection and caught it, and it's a special J for Nolan because he's the only one who knew where the egg was. Of course, after the second egg was stolen from his short voice, Nolan had to tell her where she was, and he had to get him out of prison with 10% of the money being sold, but he refused, and she watched him say by drinking that the offer was available to him to some extent steal the egg from His Voice, and Tiggy watched him hear a decision. And then they went down to the prison yard to lock a hole in the stones, and Beacon John shyly is a big rock and landing it in the wall, but it doesn't land a little rock underneath which you support, and show Nola to John that if they work as a team they can escape the prison, and her watch steals the egg before, and John starts in to escape prison and ask him John about Azai, the son of a policeman who turned to a criminal. He told him that he had a belief for years. His father and the clothing of an hour loved her so much. What he talks to and does not seem to exist for a little year on the day of tomorrow was his father Jay from the workpiece and benched on the Taravisa, and he wore the clock because he was forgetting it amid paper in the archives. His father was a burglar and asked him what he worked for at school. Nolan refused to reply to him, and a week later he threw in a boarding school, and her hour he decided that he remained a costume. They thought about Harami and asked Nolan about his father, but John Balin refused that he was talking about him and sleeping to Tani Yam and by Zi Nolan. Her watch for the laundromat and Permi chemicals in the boiler and Bast, and he and John, to a certain extent, exploded and beat the guards who entered them and arrived at the door to the square, and Beacon was locked. The captain's office restored its watch and opened it with the courtyard door card. In the spirit of the wall they built, the small rock Bekel who supported the big rock, and a part of the wall cradled their feet and kept on top of a mountain, and favored two walks on the wall to some extent. The one who arrives at the helicopter is beaten by the guard who stops their foot and Begree Nolan on the plane and beats the pilot before he kills him. John Bimi stands in front of him to prepare for the flight, and he hits the chain of the gate with bullets. The guards lock and then the pilots run, but a guard from the prison prepares the RPG, beats him on the bridge. Enter John, the second side of the bridge, and Bacon Musk in a rope, and some would seen him with a delivery for the pilot and Bacon, whose watch the guard struck a Tanny rocket on them. Pinfurch in it, and they escaped from prison successfully. And the news of their escape to Bishop, who would love the office of an intelligence analyst with his shoulder to follow from the service at Raza, and by telling her that John Hewlin had escaped, and by the place where they remained. I guess I would. From the building, Beacon John, and Yulin arrived for the pilot who moved them from their place. Figaro addressed them, and Beacon Nolan started telling about his plan to steal his voice and saying to John that his voice would ask all guests that they prefer in the main role. The egg is in the first floor collectibles and has heavy security, but in the hidden entrance of the ovary to hedge they enter it and steal the egg and base. And John says it's stupid because they don't call him a sharp plan and ask about security in the mansion. So I say to him that the guards don't set the ground unless they change. The surveillance kit changed 7 and mind a camera in the mansion, and all the mansion is an inch of observation. However, the door of the safe, that shitty white door, is impossible to explode, and the door is obscured only with an eye fingerprint and the sound of his voice. A secret number changed every 6 minutes. The number on the mobile will be his voice, which is always in his pocket, and he will not be obscured except with his fingerprint. On the night of the arms dealer's masquerade, they moved on. John entered the party after visiting an invitation and staying in charge of his voice mobile and Bacon within the grocery kit. About his thumbprint, but the first thing John Bischoff has in her soul, and he tells her that he is not going to take away from him because it is the only way to tell him his name from the crime she committed against him, and by saying it's not going to be long in the palace, Katir, and trying to get away from it with her hands and Beazle dancing with her. His voice somewhat appealed to him. She had a Cuban vice of drinking on Nolan's tray, but Nolan won't keep his fingerprint cheap, and his voice moves on John and tells him that he loves dancing with the most beautiful one at the party. So John lets him dance with Bishop. They banged as he walked with Bigar, stealing his mobile, and asked Nolan Azai to know that his voice was demanding of his human beings in the head. John explains to him that his voice is short and he loves to show off people and impose his control, so he expected that he would never let anyone steal his lights, especially if he was too mad. If a big man dances with an attentive girl, they agree that they are fumbling in some, and Nuna signs the drink on John's suit and Bijal for the bathroom near the safe ovens and Bakar Nolan for a substitution. They can get into the ground before some point. Take my mind from them and get to the envelope door that opens with an acoustic fingerprint. Point his voice, copy his fingerprint on the Cuban, open his mobile phone, and then open his cell phone with the PIN number and insert it into the safe, and Peggy confirmed the face and voice fingerprint. Carrot helps him embody Wash and his voice. They succeeded in opening the safe door, and before they entered Bella, they said that Agent Das was standing and Ram and threatening them with the gun. By telling John she could have thought of him innocent, but after trying to steal the egg, they made sure it was irreversible, and if you want it, it will steal in you. Shen Yulin dog does itself like a dog and then belt and stomach to sign the gun. He and Endela entered the safe and locked them in the air, but they gave me that I could enter the safe in a second way. Along with the egg, he told them that the second egg remained her own and preferred her egg, who were strangling them and trying to win it. She doesn't appreciate it. They are dragons in some of the possession of his voice. He gave him the egg and said it was a costume. Pippin's drinking aligns with his voice. They're trapping and being beaten by guards and pygmies. They rose up in an abandoned place under the Terran wrestling ring, because what they heard was the voice of Syrax, and Bacon was their foot, with Bishop and Bisbah John, to allow Nolan to acknowledge a place. The egg in Egypt is hidden in the Great Pyramid. The ovation is Cleopatra's secret tomb, and he made sure there was an egg because of the scan he did for the pyramid. After what I walked, I knew the place of the egg by turning on his voice, numbing him and stealing eggs to show Egypt and answer the following egg. And then he does his voice and Bacon lace and tow the gun with its breadwinner and beating them with it. One of them is that the bullet in Teggy in the chain is enough of them. Bebek John himself, beating his voice and deciding that he's taking away Nolan, is tight-lipped and running a pop to arrest her and uphold his innocence. But Dolan says that as a bear, the egg is not in Egypt. They must answer the egg. If they want to catch Bishop and her watch, They are the dragons who have worked, run away and read in the text of the Turan circuit. He heard his word but the tour with a pegger on John and his head. And then they are the dragons who have grown from their place and appreciated that they are running from the ring and riding Qatar to move on the place of the next egg. And John tries to threaten Nolan by throwing out of the diameter if he doesn't put the egg in Finn's place. But Nolan says no matter how old he is, he stays evil because he gets used to being a sheriff. By entering the towing in the last of Zia before the next diameter, John says to him that his father Makanj Sharif was a fraudster. On his birthday, his father disappeared from his life and his mother for no reason. It was her watch that he decided he remained a cop for so much, because he almost needs to arrest Bishop to clear his name, and what he discusses is a con-violent. He says to him that his father was obsessed with the sense of egg and the secret of its disappearance. Miss Atter was traveling anywhere with auctions to buy strange collectibles. Those who loved her were more than his son and Lee. He was rumored that he was the last one to shawl the following suit, and then the egg disappeared. One day he met her in his father's office, who died, and thought about what happened to him because of the hour. He threw her in caution and broke her. He estimated that he would locate her in a place in Argentina and Pisafar John and Yulin on Argentina in the middle of the forests in the shelter where the eggs, and after Tiam Hills travel and Beacon. John is tired because he walks and R.A. Nolan speaks somewhat Belakai that he flips the map like her villages. Mistake 1. Every walker has a mistake. He is nervous. He grabs the map. He cuts it off Nolan's foot, pims the compass and throws it on the ground. Hydropower means that in a river close to them it is the one who generates energy for the place, and they are a safe in need of a certain key. Bale Aqua and Ra is a huge oasis of the treasures of Wasser. Among the treasures were the Mercedes Arab Legion, 1,000 years old, and 2 tilts that were specially manufactured. It has 4 PBS Arabs in the world made of steel, and its bulletproof shower is studded in flames. They meet a wood box with Cleopatra and Nolan's eyebrows on it. The first thing he takes is that he falls from it in the ground, but he does not get scratched, and Beagle to John that he handed it to him, but if he sells it, he has a buyer. She told them that she was sure what Egypt was doing and she was watching them for a little while. She arrived in the shelter, and before Betcha received the egg, she attacked them, and she would vote them all and Bigrua on Arabic, so that they could get her heir, and Bignola that he would occupy it manually. He almost worked, ridden her and escaped from the shelter through a mountain tunnel, chased by Das Arabian, operating in the same manual way, to some extent, delivering the last tunnel and planting through a waterfall, and befell Nola Musk the egg to a certain extent coming out of the water. Vanities on John, but John Ma Birdish decides that he's dropping the egg and coming down and swiveling it. To some extent John's fabricator is on the scrape, and I wonder that his preference is for the egg. So he says to him Nolan that he was a hostile base spinning on his mobile, and Bale Aqua drinking the sortie of their foot. The one with him. It means she won't sell them as much as she is destitute, and all who want it is losing. I don't know, because it's what Bejerch is on the bankruptcy. Better than a bankruptcy. And John sold to catch her, but he's not white. B and B. John and B Chirp are partners, and all of these plans were from the beginning, and he won over him in his voice, and the name of Bequi in the sense of the elephant in chess and chess in feline, and he did it. The first in the museum and the second of his voices was from Nolan, which was a key. They are under the ring, and human beings aspire to and threaten the gun. They are handed the Nola for the following egg. They had enough of him in a tree and said to John that his father was a fraudster, because he almost decided that he stayed more professional than him and outperformed him in his field, and move on Egypt to hand over the hill eggs. The Egyptian billionaire in Pharaoh built it. They were present for Joy, and the special forces were shown to attack Joy and to land on those who were in possession of stolen possessions, and John and B Chirp escaped from the place after 6 but what I've caught for a long time, because it's so much to run away for them, to tell them that he's come to DOS with their veins that you're landing $1 million. What was so safe because it was almost frozen, and he told them a new operation weakened the booty and compensated all the flowers that pulled out of them, and they needed to decide quickly before the agent stepped in. And they did come up with a base and mimic a limit on the boat because they would have accepted Nolan's offer and moved with him on the Louvre Museum to plan a new theft. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the stitches until you enjoy a new story. Peace.